The laughter echoed against the mahogany-paneled walls of Alexander Walter's study. The tech mogul was in his element, entertaining his fellow board members with what he considered a brilliant joke at the expense of his household staff. Diana Johnson stood perfectly still, her face a practiced mask of neutrality as she held the document he had thrust into her hands moments earlier. 20 years of service had taught her how to remain invisible in plain sight. But today, something had shifted. "I'm serious, Diana," Alexander said, wiping tears of amusement from his eyes. "My lawyers just sent over this contract from our new partners in Shanghai. Even our translators are struggling with the technical terminology. If you can translate this correctly by tomorrow morning, I'll give you my monthly salary. That's nearly $390,000. More laughter erupted from the 3 other executives seated around the imported Italian coffee table. They were celebrating the closing of a $2.9 billion acquisition, their 4th this year. To them, this was merely after-dinner entertainment. "Alexander, you're terrible," chuckled James Bill, the CFO. "Don't tease the help." Diana glanced down at the document written entirely in Mandarin. Complex characters filled the page with technical diagrams and annotations in the margins. The paper trembled slightly in her fingers, not from intimidation, but from a simmering emotion she rarely allowed herself to feel in this house. Indignation. 5 o'clock tomorrow, Alexander continued, already turning back to his colleagues. "Although I imagine you'll be returning that promptly." He waved his hand in dismissal, the diamond cufflink catching the light from the crystal chandelier overhead. Diana nodded once, still clutching the document. "Will there be anything else this evening, Mr. Walter?" "No, that's all. Make sure the bar is stocked before you leave. We'll be up late celebrating." With another nod, Diana left the study, closing the heavy oak door behind her. The sounds of laughter faded as she walked down the long corridor toward the kitchen. Her sensible shoes made no sound on the plush carpet that probably cost more than her annual salary. In the sanctuary of the kitchen, Diana placed the document on the marble countertop and stared at it. She had worked for the Walter family since arriving in Boston 20 years ago. She had watched Alexander's children grow up, had maintained his home with impeccable care, had even nursed his wife through the final stages of cancer 3 years ago. And still, after all this time, she remained invisible to him, a prop to be used for amusement. Diana reached for her phone in the pocket of her uniform and took a photo of the document. Then she sent a quick text message. "It's me. I need your help with something important." 40 minutes later, after ensuring the bar was stocked and the kitchen spotless, Diana left the Walter estate and drove her 10-year-old Honda to her modest apartment in a working-class neighborhood 20 miles away in Boston's outskirts. Despite the late hour, lights still burned in many windows. This wasn't a neighborhood where people had the luxury of early nights. Inside her small but immaculate one-bedroom apartment, Diana changed out of her uniform and sat down at her computer. She opened her email and attached the photo of the document, then typed a brief message. "Professor Branson, I hope this message finds you well. I apologize for contacting you so late, but I have an urgent matter that requires your expertise. I would be grateful for any assistance you could provide with the attached document. With warm regards, Diana Johnson." She hit send and then walked to a small bookshelf in the corner of her living room. From behind a row of novels, she pulled out a leather-bound notebook. Inside were handwritten notes, carefully organized and annotated in multiple languages. Diana turned to a blank page and began to write, her pen moving swiftly across the paper. What Alexander Walter didn't know, what none of her employers had ever bothered to learn, was that before moving from Massachusetts due to personal circumstances, Diana Johnson had been Dr. Diana Johnson, a linguistics professor at the Central University in Boston, specializing in East Asian languages with a focus on business and technical translation, including postdoctoral work at Beijing University. On May 3, 2024, Diana's phone chimed at 2:45 a.m. It was Professor Branson, her former colleague from the linguistics conference circuit. Just saw your email. Fascinating document. It's a technical partnership agreement for quantum computing hardware. The terminology is highly specialized. Need help with anything specific? Happy to discuss further. Diana smiled. After leaving academia, she had deliberately disappeared into anonymity, finding safety in being overlooked. The academic community believed she had stepped away due to personal reasons. Only Professor Branson knew the truth, having recognized her at a charity event 5 years ago where she was serving drinks. He had kept her secret, understanding her need for privacy. "Thank you," she typed back. "Any technical terms I might have trouble with are appreciated. I'll handle the rest." She worked through the night, her translation skills rusty but returning with each character she deciphered. The document was complex, outlining proprietary technology that would revolutionize data encryption. Diana noted several concerning clauses that granted the Chinese partner unrestricted access to Walter Tech's security infrastructure, details likely buried in technical language to evade scrutiny. By dawn, she had completed a meticulous translation, along with a separate document highlighting the problematic sections. She printed both, then caught 2 hours of sleep before returning to the Walter estate for her regular 7 a.m. shift. Throughout the morning of May 4th, 2024, Diana performed her usual duties, preparing breakfast, tidying rooms, and starting laundry. Mr. Walter and his guests emerged around 11, nursing hangovers with coffee she had prepared. "Diana," Alexander called as she restocked the breakfast bar, "I hope you enjoyed our little joke last night. You can return those papers when you have a moment." Diana nodded. "I've completed the translation, Mr. Walter." Alexander paused, coffee cup halfway to his lips. "I'm sorry." "The document. I've translated it as requested." She retrieved the folder from her work bag and approached the table where the executive sat in stunned silence. "That's impossible," Alexander scoffed, though his smile had faltered. "You're telling me you translated a complex technical document overnight?" "Yes, sir. I also took the liberty of annotating sections that may be of concern." The room fell completely silent as Diana placed the folder on the table. Alexander stared at her as if seeing her for the first time. He opened the folder and began scanning the translation, his expression shifting from amusement to confusion to alarm. "But this section here," Diana continued, pointing to a paragraph on the 3rd page, "grants your Chinese partners unrestricted backdoor access to all security protocols, and this clause effectively transfers ownership of any jointly developed technology to their subsidiary in Shanghai." Alexander's face had drained of color. He looked up at his colleagues, who appeared equally shocked. Where did you learn?" he stammered. "I was a professor of linguistics, specializing in technical translation at the Central University in Boston, before circumstances required me to step away." Diana stated simply, "I focused on Mandarin during my postdoctoral work at Beijing University." James Bill, the CFO, grabbed the document. She's right, Alexander. These clauses would have gutted us. How did our legal team miss this? The technical terminology obscures the legal implications, Diana explained. Unless one understands both the language and the technology, these clauses appear standard. Alexander stood suddenly, knocking his chair backward. Everyone out. Not you, Diana. You stay. The other executives gathered their belongings, James clutching the translated document protectively. When the room emptied, Alexander paced for a full minute before stopping to face Diana. Why didn't you tell me? All these years, you never asked, sir. The simple truth hung in the air between them. In 20 years, he had never once inquired about her background, her education, or her life before entering his service. How much do they pay you? Alexander finally asked. $55,000 annually, sir, plus health insurance. Alexander ran his hand through his graying hair. Christ! And you've been handling my children's homework, organizing my library, managing my household. Yes, sir. You just saved my company from a catastrophic security breach and potentially hundreds of millions in lost intellectual property, he said, his voice quieter now. Why would you help me after how I've treated you? Diana stood quietly, hands folded in front of her uniform. I work here, she said finally. What happens to this company affects everyone who depends on it, including me. Alexander sank into his chair, studying Diana with new eyes. 20 years, he muttered. 20 years you've worked in my home, raised my children, cared for my dying wife, all while I treated you as furniture. He winced at his own words. I don't even know where you're from. Massachusetts, Diana replied. I taught at the Central University in Boston before personal circumstances forced a change. I left academia to start over. She paused. Your first wife hired me. She was kind. The mention of his late first wife softened Alexander's expression. Elizabeth had better judgment than I ever did. He drummed his fingers on the table. The salary, I promised. That was cruel. It was a joke, Diana said. I understood. No, it was more than that. It was a power play to remind everyone in that room of their place and yours. He looked away, shame evident in his posture. I became exactly the type of man I swore I'd never be. Diana remained silent. That moment of self-reflection wasn't for her to interrupt. Alexander stood suddenly. The deal's a deal. $390,000. Mr. Walter, that's not necessary. It's Alexander, please. And yes, it is necessary. He walked to his desk and unlocked a drawer. This isn't just about the translation. You saved my company from a catastrophic breach. Our security team will need to do a complete audit, but your work just prevented what could have been hundreds of millions in damages. He returned with his checkbook. I'm writing this now before my ego finds some excuse not to. Diana watched as he wrote the check, her mind racing. That amount would fund her nephew's medical school education. It would help her sister's family. It would secure her retirement. Alexander handed her the check. I'd like to offer you a different position. Our international division needs someone with your expertise. The salary is appropriate for your qualifications with benefits to match. Diana looked at the check, then back at Alexander. I've been invisible for 20 years for a reason. My family remains at risk. Understanding dawned in Alexander's eyes. A private contractor position, then. No public profile. Working directly with our legal team on international agreements. We can structure it however makes you comfortable. Diana considered this. I would need certain guarantees. Anonymity Flexible hours? And she hesitated, then continued firmly. Equal treatment. No more jokes at the expense of your staff. Alexander flushed, but nodded. You have my word, and I understand it will take time to trust that. Diana folded the check carefully and placed it in her pocket. I should finish my duties for today. Of course. Alexander stepped aside, then added, Diana, I'm sorry. Truly. She acknowledged this with a small nod before turning to leave. On August 17th, 2024, Diana sat in a private office on the top floor of Walter Tower. Her desk contained a state-of-the-art computer system and references in 7 languages. She had just finished reviewing a joint venture agreement with a Brazilian tech firm, identifying 3 contractual vulnerabilities that the legal team had missed. A knock came at her door, and Alexander entered, carrying 2 coffee cups. He set one on her desk, prepared exactly how she liked it. The Singapore deal is moving forward thanks to your revisions, he said, taking a seat. The board was impressed. Diana accepted the coffee with a small smile. She still maintained her modest apartment and kept a low profile, but her life had transformed in ways she hadn't imagined possible. I have something for you, Alexander said, placing a small package on her desk. Open it when you have a moment. After he left, Diana unwrapped the package to find a new nameplate for her door. It read, Dr. Diana Johnson, Director of International Linguistics and Cultural Affairs. Beneath it was a handwritten note. Your choice whether to use this. Either way, you are seen now. Diana ran her fingers over the engraved letters of her long unused title. 20 years of invisibility had ended with a translation and a challenge accepted. She placed the nameplate in her drawer, not quite ready for that step, but appreciating that the choice was now hers to make.